Morning, everyone. Our session today is titled One Nation, One Subscription. Is it a global game changer or a white elephant? And we are here to unpack a bold national initiative that has significant implications for how research is accessed and disseminated, not just in India, but globally. For context, ONOS emerged from a unique mix of challenges in India: widespread concerns over predatory publishing, research integrity, and stark purchasing power disparities across institutions. After years of negotiation and groundwork, India has now implemented the largest multi-publisher national subscription deal in the world. The rollout is being phased and is still in progress. It represents a landmark moment for the country and possibly a test case for others watching from the sidelines. By providing national access to paywalled research content, ONOS aims to democratize access to knowledge and possibly shift the center of gravity towards a more inclusive academic ecosystem. But as with any bold idea, it raises some important questions. What do we absolutely need to make national subscription models work well? What are the implications for small and society publishers? After the news about the initiative, what are we hearing from people on the ground? And last but not the least, does it risk becoming a symbolic gesture without real systemic changes? We'll hear diverse perspectives today, and in terms of the format of the presentation, I'll do quick introductions followed by each panelist who will share their own perspectives, and then some time for Q&A. So let me start with Dr. Shalini Aris. Dr. Shalini is an internationally recognized academic leader, institution builder, and pioneer of digital initiatives in India. With over 4 decades of experience in higher education, she began her career at the University of Mysore in 1976 and retired in 2016, during which time she founded 2 path-breaking academic institutions: the International School of Information Management at the University of Mysore and the Myra School of Business in Mysuru. A trailblazer in digital scholarship, Dr. Aris spearheaded the open access movement in India. Her contributions have been recognized with numerous honors. She's also a host of a podcast called InfoFire, and Dr. Shalini has hosted over 27 episodes. Next, Ed. Ed's the Director of Research Environment Alliances at Springer Nature. We were just joking, he's done this many times. He has over 2 decades of scholarly publishing experience, including 11 years as a journal editor with a variety of nature journals. In his current role, he is responsible for building alliances with research institutions and community organizations working to make research more rigorous, reproducible, diverse, ethical, and open. For the past 2 years, he's traveled more than 5,500 kilometers across India by bus to visit universities, institutes of science, technology and management, and other research organizations throughout the subcontinent. Next, Andrea Vieira. Andrea is the General Coordinator of CAPAS Journal Portal, one of the largest digital scientific libraries in Latin America, providing qualified access to scholarly information for Brazilian higher education and research institutes. She's a member of the advisory committee of Cielo Brazil and was recently appointed to the advisory board of DOAJ, contributing to the advancement of open science, scholarly publishing standards, and equitable access to scientific knowledge. Last but not the least, Rob Johnson. Rob is the Managing Director of Research Consulting, a mission-driven business which works to improve the effectiveness and impact of research and scholarly communication. He began his career with KPMG, the international professional services firm, before working in a senior research management role at the University of Nottingham. Since founding Research Consulting in 2013, he has led more than 150 projects in the field of scholarly communication and research. Very interestingly, Rob recently co-authored Safeguarding the Future of Scholarly Publishing, a major study examining how 66 learned societies are navigating technological, financial, and policy pressures in scholarly publishing. The research revealed that 56% of societies face declining journal revenues, with significant implications for the ability to maintain quality standards and serve their research communities. He's also currently partnering with ALPSP on their next 50% project, facilitating a different conversation about the open access transition that moves beyond simple metrics to embrace scientific, participatory, and epistemic forms of openness, ensuring that transition serves all scholars and all ways of knowing. Welcome to everyone. Let's start with Dr. Shalini Aras. I think somebody who's been part of the ecosystem for a very, very long time. After the initial euphoria of the announcement, what are you hearing from on the ground?
Thank you, Nikesh. First of all, for the generous introduction, and secondly, of course, also for having me here. Well, I like the theme or the title that you have given. I think it aptly describes whether it is a game changer or a white elephant. Game changer, yes. When you look at it from the point of view of access, particularly equity of access, because especially I worked in a university which is considered to be a tier 2, primarily because not in terms of quality, but because we are a state funded university, which means resources are less compared to the elite institutions or the central universities. So I have kind of gone through the struggle or the suffering of when you don't have access to any journal article, or what are the consequences, or what is its impact on your own research. So I know what it means. So it's a game changer because equity of access. So the same buffet is being served to all of us, which is really very good, big, bold step. Yes, because everyone now has, whether you are in a remote village or college in a small town, or in big cities like Delhi, you have access. But it is a white elephant too. That's what we are hearing on the ground. Why is it? I think the metaphor of white elephant is a good one, because in our culture you say you gift a white elephant to someone whom you don't like. Usually, because it's because it looks grand, it looks nice, but then you don't like because you want that person to kind of go through that, you can say suffer through that, right? So that's because why are we, I mean, somebody might question, am I looking the gift horse in the mouth? Yes. Why? Because it is public money. And then it's also a question of, just to give a comparison, it's an expensive object now. Because, I mean, to give you, of course, we talk about in India in crores, 6,000 crores for 3 years, 2,000 per year, which essentially means $750 million. Okay? For a comparison, I don't know, some of you might have heard of, India's famous Chandrayaan mission, that is a moon mission that we did 2 years back. The moon mission budget was $75 million. 75 million, whereas owner's budget is 750 million. That's the difference, right? So are we doing justice to this budget is the main question that many people ask, especially, of course, when I say many, because people, equity also means various other things. Where do you put this money? Not only put this money place for research itself, because Chandrayaan or the moon mission has been a successful mission with such a small budget. So could we have done differently, better, etc.? That's one. The second, I mean, I listen to the ground, for example, the open access advocate. I am an open access advocate. I'm not an activist, I'm an open access. I make a distinction, because what I mean by an advocate and not an activist, activists are, but whereas I am also a pragmatic idealist. Okay, so I know that you need money. It's not that everything can happen. So what OA advocates are saying is that it's a golden opportunity that India missed, because we could have probably changed, redefined access by at least transitioning through, let us say, something like a transformative agreement, no, we do. And the other problem with the ONOS policy is it's a policy in the dark. It's opaque. Not much is known about, because we know that it is not based on certain ground realities of what is the use, what kind of journals are being used, who is using. Because the key question is, yes, you are giving a gift, big gift, true. If you take horse to the water, the question is, will it drink? And then I also would say, someone who has been doing research also in scientific, the Bradford law still holds good. Because, you know, every institution, it's only a small percentage of journals which are being used. So could we have chosen a different model? We didn't even, you know, make a study of that, at least the owners, it is not. So that's where the problem lies in, the opaqueness, lack of evidence-based research supporting this decision. These are some of the, you know, issues, concerns that are raised. The other question is also about some of the, at least I would say, you know, it depends on whom you ask. As I said, the reactions or responses to the owners has been varied, diverse, because it depends on who asks. As I said, if you ask a, you know, a remote college student or a librarian, they are all excited, naturally, because they have access to this. They feel, okay, we are as good or as, I mean, when it comes to access, as the elite IITs. But if you ask IIT students, they are nonchalant. It doesn't make a difference to them. It's the same. We were getting the same, it's okay. What do we gain? Nothing. So if you ask, it depends on whom you ask, that's why I said. And if you ask researchers, early career researchers, they are excited because they still don't know how to access. But if you ask a seasoned veteran, you know, senior researchers across the country, they all know how to access, in the sense behind the paywalls as well. Even though there is, it's a naturally dismantling the paywalls at scale is happening with ONOS. But without ONOS, now I am a kind of an independent researcher. I don't have access to many things, but I am doing my research fine, because I know there are so many different ways that I can access all this content. I don't have to list all of them, right? So all of them. So if you ask a researcher, a seasoned one, they know how to access. So the question is, what is it actually dismantling and how much of it? Because we know that, you know, studies have shown that 50% is already available open access. So these are some of the questions, key issues that are being raised on the ground.
Okay.
I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shalini. Let's get a different perspective. So from a large publisher perspective and somebody who's been involved in seeing, you know, how historically this has evolved, Ed, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's next?
Well, that was a hard introduction to follow. I agreed with almost all of that. I think that's a really interesting perspective. From my perspective, when I first heard about this several years ago, I thought, one subscription for a country as big as India. That would be an interesting thing. Never going to happen. It's far too diverse. Now, my background, my previous to my current role, I was in China for 6 years, from 2012 to 2018. And what was extraordinary about, and so I'm really interested in emerging regions where science is growing and there's optimism and there's demand and there's opportunity. And just seeing how quickly things were evolving in China. But they have it's centralized and it's not centralized, but it's much more manageable to do these sort of big things where the country moves as one. Doesn't always move as one the way that people expect it to. But India, on the other hand, so China has lots of universities, hundreds of universities. India has thousands of universities. I think the number was 6,000 institutes of colleges. Okay, higher education. You can, yeah, it's difficult the definitions are subtly different, and it's a spectrum. the different things. And working out how do you address an emerging market and then demands of an emerging region for scientific endeavor is really tough. Of those, the researchers in those 6,000, there is a variety of demands and of needs. But the primary need, it's not the only need, but the primary need is for them to have access to the research. And so I don't see, the question poses, is this a game changer or a white elephant? And you said yes, both. I would say no, not either. I see this as a stepping stone that solves many of the problems, but by no means all of the problems of an emerging country like India. The broader view of this is science is growing, scientific output is growing in essentially 3 places in the world: China, India, and Africa. And so how do we manage that in those 3 different places are going to require 3 very different solutions. And I think this solution, or this attempt at a solution, is very much specific to India and meets a particular problem of India. It may meet other problems elsewhere as well, but I think it is particular to India. And so we'll see whether or not it could work in other places. But I also will see whether it works in India. So you expressed the need that it would have been nice to have more evidence, more data, more insight. And I agree, and that's nice. But then it would never have happened because it would have taken forever and there would be all these viewpoints. Now that it has happened, I think it is absolutely our responsibility to see whether it's actually working, whether it's delivering the vital information that is needed and the usage that is needed in the diverse subcontinent that is India. And that's the other point that I would make. You could try and be more targeted, say, okay, these are the ones, and typically when we talk to big consortia, they say, no, we just want tier 1 and tier 2. We want nature, and we want the ones that are just below nature. That's what we want. We don't care about the other journals. As a former researcher myself, a lot of the best research happens in tiers 3 and 4. A lot of incremental research is absolutely vital to progress in science. And if you say, no, I only want my researchers to be able to see the big leaps, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that they're not seeing of their colleagues, and there are a whole bunch of stuff that they're not seeing that is important research, incremental research. And so by saying, well, we're going to choose to be efficient, cost efficient, then you're going to actually miss things in the long tail. And I would say that that's a false economy. And so what I'm saying is, yes, you could have structured it differently based on more and more and more study, and then I think it wouldn't have happened. Or now that we've done it, let's make sure that we study. Let's make sure that we understand the impact that it has. It's basically a grand experiment that I think will be really interesting and will inform many of the choices we make going forward in the scholarly publishing system.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Rob, what are you hearing from small and society publishers?
Well, I'm just listening to Shalini and Ed reminds me of Mr. Jaggers, who's the lawyer in Great Expectations, and he says, take nothing on its looks, take everything on evidence. And I think that's kind of what both of you are talking about. This looks like a really good deal. It's a great initiative, and I know there's a lot of people who are very supportive of it. But when you do start digging a little bit deeper, it is only public and government-funded institutions, and there's a lot of privately funded institutions that are not part of this deal. And of course, it is only 30 publishers, so there's a lot of publishers who are not part of it. And also thinking about some of the work we're doing for OASPA about, where does the next 50% of OA content come from? This doesn't help open access at all. This is really just a very big deal. Perhaps one of the biggest ever, and that's great. It helps on access, but it doesn't address participation. It doesn't really do much in terms of local infrastructure and publishing capability. So I think it has positives, but as the other speakers have said, there are some big limitations. In terms of what it means for small publishers, as Nikesh said, and Paula kindly alluded to this in the last session, we did a study earlier this year on society publishers. You can find it on our website or look at my LinkedIn profile. And we found that a lot of small publishers and society publishers, their revenues are under pressure, and competing in the publishing landscape is getting more difficult. And I think really this is another illustration of that. So you had to be a big publisher even to get invited to the table. It was also, speaking to some small publishers, it was a lot of work to be involved in these negotiations. So publishers had to produce, this is the income we've been receiving from Indian institutes, so they had to supply that to the government. And then it was very much a take it or leave it negotiation. So the government said to the publishers, we'll give you your current revenues and then a sort of inflationary or slightly above inflationary increase of maybe 7 or 8%. And I know, talking to some of the smaller publishers who were involved, it was a really difficult decision because many of them were growing revenues faster than what was on offer, but there's the security of being part of this deal and what happens if you're not. So it's a challenging undertaking for the sort of medium-sized publishers who were involved, and of course a lot of publishers have been left out in the cold completely. So I think it is a game changer in terms of access, but maybe not in terms of more inclusive thinking about open access. And I do worry that it further marginalizes the smaller publishers who are being marginalized already. We're in a publishing system that favors scale, it favors volume, and that is often to the detriment of diversity and selectivity.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Andrea, you've seen all of this and been somebody who's led a national deal in Brazil. How are you seeing this? What are some of the challenges that you anticipate?
So we have been doing that for 25 years now. We are celebrating this year, the 25th anniversary. And of course, it's a challenge since the beginning, mainly because of budget. So people that are not researchers, they don't understand the investment. But I think that it's a game changer because mainly we are talking about legal access. We know that the researchers, they have access, but not all the times in the right way. So so that's why I think it's a game changer, because you're going to provide legal access to all the community, so they're going to be happy. And you're going to see, Shalini, that people they question us. But if you say, oh, so let's reduce the number of institutions or reduce the content, people go crazy. They say, no, you cannot do that because it's very important for the community. So what we have been doing since 2023 is that we decided to invest more in open access, invest in Cielo, because Cielo was created in Brazil. Now it's in 16 countries, but it started in Brazil. And CAPES, as a federal funding agency, was not investing in Cielo. So since 2023, we decided to put more money. So now we are in a very nice project to put more money, to have more Brazilian journals. So we want to sponsor that infrastructure in Brazil. We are also signing read and publish agreements. They say transformative agreements, but I do think they are read and publish, but we are signing because we do want also to, like I mentioned, to support open access and open science in many ways. And we are going to work with the Green Via. So we are going to also support the researchers and give them the tools so that they can have their articles in the repository, and also to help them, because I don't know in other countries, I don't know how it's in India, but in Brazil, the researcher, I say they are heroes because they do everything, so they don't have help. So it's very hard to be a researcher in Brazil. So what we have been doing is trying how to make easier for the researcher to have their research published in an open access, how they can, promote what they're doing. So it is hard and it needs money. And this is something that people, you have to work with open science, with open access, but it costs money. Even if it's like Cielo, that it's a diamond initiative, it needs money. It needs to be professional. So we have been talking to a lot of people. So this is the kind of challenge you're going to have. Of course, we have the language barrier. We have this technological infrastructure that it's necessary. But I think it's a must-do, because when we see the scholarly output, if I'm not wrong, 60% of the scholarly output now comes from the Global South. So we need to make sure our researchers, they have access to, high quality content. So I know that we have the smaller publishers and like the societies, and we subscribe most of the small publishers, and we are working to include everybody in read and publish contracts, and we are now working with subscribe to open, so we are trying different models. And that's what I suggest, that you start now planning the next phases, because it costs money, and the most important part is talk to the community, because they will tell you what ways they want to do, because like at CAPES we have 50 different areas that we evaluate, that we support. And they are completely different, because like when we are talking about social and humanities, they want to publish in Brazil. So it doesn't make sense for us to look, to publishers outside Brazil. So we need to talk to the community and see what they need for their research. I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. I do have a few questions, but I know that a few people had spoken to me offline as well, that they're looking forward to the session and they might have some questions. So maybe we'll open it up to the audience and to see if there are any specific questions before I jump in. So I don't know if there's anything on the...
Not yet.
Okay, yeah.
There's a
Yes,
question over
please.
here.
Yeah,
Do we have a...
yeah, I think
we have
there's
a mic?
one. Yeah.
Forgive me if I've misunderstood, but I believe that in the announcements of ONOS there was a reference to wanting to include open access, and that there was a budget mentioned for that, which then they're working out how it's going to be administered and spent. So just interested in any comments on that, rather than saying that it absolutely does nothing at all for OA. I think there is a plan, I hope. Fingers crossed.
Yes, and I saw the same. I think there was a budget, but I don't think it was going to go that far. That was, so
yeah, it's a
fundamentally
massive country with enormous output, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
frankly, it's a country where the old subscription model probably fits their purse better than converting to paid OA, in all honesty, and that's one of the big challenges for bigger nations with high output. They're in a very different bracket than countries who can say, right, we'll do a national TA. So yeah, very interesting to see where it goes. Thank you.
Astrid, I'm ALPS editor. I just wonder, where is the money coming from? Because if the institutions are no longer having to pay their fees to the publishers, do they have to give a commission or a percentage of what they used to pay to the publishers, to the government now? And for instance, what Rob was saying about the private universities, do they have an option to maybe opt into ONOS if they otherwise get left out?
Yeah, the money is coming directly from the government. So anyway, even otherwise, government used to support in different ways, different consortia which were already there. As I said earlier, central universities, state universities, institutions, they were all being funded for this budget differently, but then now it is one. That's where one nation, one subscription. So the money funds for this is coming from the government budget. That's one. Private institutions or private universities, as of now, they don't have access. They might be given in the future. I mean, it's being under consideration, let me put it that way. And how is that going to be implemented, whether they're going to pay something, etc. That's something that will happen probably in the future.
Liz.
Just going to say thank you for the panel. It's a really, really interesting discussion, and I think it's really exciting to see different models. And potentially one of the things that really strikes me about this deal is that, and some of the different comments, it's interesting that there were 4 different perspectives on game changers and not. It's really interesting that we always say that one model, one size doesn't fit all. So it's really, really exciting to see something practical, something different. And I agree with you, Ed, about tracking the evidence on this. But I'm also interested in the panel's discussion. There was a discussion from Australia probably last year about doing the same thing. I suspect some of the things that you said, Ed, it wasn't trial because it involved too many consultations and lots of people put their hands up and said this isn't going to work, and particularly the libraries. But I just wondered on the panel's view whether they could see this being done in other places. Obviously, the Latin America, South America context, they're doing lots of really interesting things through Cielo and other. This kind of work is good to see in a different context. But I'm just interested in different contexts and what the panel think about the potential for this kind of model in other places.
I think it will be determined very much by the local politics. The proposal by Kathy Foley in Australia, we thought that was a really interesting one. It was an interesting proposition, and it seemed to be going in the right direction. And then people just went no, and it was like, oh, what? No, what the? And that's the sort of thing that can happen. And who knows whether it might be revived in the future. The thing about that, Kathy really was a strong proponent, and now that she's no longer the chief scientist, it's difficult to see how, unless the current chief scientist takes that up, which is no obvious, it looks like that's dead in the water. So it's extraordinary that a country like Australia, which has a few dozen universities, can't bring itself together when a continent like India with 6,000 can. So it's very much about the context on the ground, political, economic, and such as that. So it could work elsewhere, but the conditions that are difficult to really define. Because if you'd asked me, will it work in India, based on looking at India and the diversity that exists, I'd say it's unlikely. Clearly it worked. So it's a demonstration that it can work even in a diverse country. We'll see. I think it would be really interesting. I could see it working in somewhere like Indonesia, perhaps, would be a really great thing. And particularly areas where research is emerging and where you really want to make sure that the basic level of resource is there as you build capacity. It's all about building capacity. And then once that capacity builds to a certain level, then I think you probably need to change the mix of how scholarly content is delivered, and in particular, as a passionate advocate for research that advances the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals will only be solved by problems in the global south, by solutions that are found in the global south. Now, if India is only publishing under a subscription model, then the rest of the world, unless they have a subscription, they won't be able to learn from the research that's going on in India if they're publishing under a subscription model. And that has implications for places like Latin America and like Africa. And so that's, I think, a drawback of this. I think it, as was alluded to, in terms of the business model, it works for India, but it doesn't necessarily work for building India out. And that is one of its, its ambitions are for Indian science to be an important contributor to world science and for it to be a scientific powerhouse. So those are some of my reservations. Yes, it could work elsewhere. I don't know how you make it work elsewhere, and it's up to other places to work out how to manage those. Again, it's very political.
Any other questions? Yes, Simon. Laura, I'll come to you next.
I was just interested just to tie it in a bit with the talk of communities. And I know, Andrea, you mentioned about your community at CAPAS. So I was just interested in hearing a bit about how you fostered that community as part of your national consortia, and if there are any tips that you can give One Nation, One Subscription for kind of creating this community around this initiative.
For us, it's easier because we are also, CAPAS is also in charge of evaluating the whole national graduate system. So the community evaluate the graduate system. So like for now, we have for 2 months researchers going to CAPAS to evaluate the programs, the masters and PhDs. So we work very close to the researchers, so it's easier for us. So we have been talking to Brazilian Academy of Science, so we invite them. We have working groups and we talk a lot, and what our perception is that the researchers, they don't fully understand the process. Only if they are editors, because even if they, okay, I'm a peer reviewer, but they are not aware. When we talk about the amount of money we invest, when we talk about, they are no way. You're paying. I remember once a researcher came and said, you spend 10 million reais. And I said, no, 100 million reais? No, dollars. And he was, no way. So now it's more than $100 million we are investing. So people, they are not aware of the budget. So sometimes people put pressure on us. So what we're trying is building capacity. I mean, talking to the researchers, and they are telling us a lot of things. As they are learning, they are building with us this way. It's not easy, but it's necessary, I think, because the feeling I have sometimes is we come to all these conferences, but I miss sometimes the researcher, the community, because they need to be in the center of it. Because we are doing this, we're doing everything for them. So that's what we're trying to do in Brazil, bring them, closer and see their needs so that we can, plan and do the next 10 years. And I do agree with Ed, it's very political. I think it is political. If you don't have support, you don't have budget, so it's not gonna work.
Laura and then Sharon, sorry, yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Laura Simonite, European Mathematical Society. So Rob, as you mentioned, small publishers have been excluded from this process, and that's often the case when it comes to these consortial agreements and consortial deals. But CAPES have been really good at including small publishers. We have a deal with CAPES, and so I just wondered if there are any practical tips that perhaps CAPES could give to ONOS about including smaller publishers and making that diversity of content a bit richer.
What I think that the small publishers, I know that I'm going to read your report. I'm very interested. We know that the way the small publishers work, it's completely different from Spring and Nature, for instance, for the big ones. And we are trying to take a look at these particular characteristic. But I think that the quality, you have quality, you know. So, and that's why it's important to have the community with us. Because when the community is together, they tell us, oh, you know, this content is important, this is important. So we have support, even to go to the Congress. Because last week I was at the Congress talking to senators, and it's amazing. Like, I said, am I speaking Greek? Because, you know, I was explaining and talking about science and technology, but they don't know the, you know, the details to get more money, because I want to include the small publishers. I want to have, I told them, we want the open science, but we need money for that. So we are building that. And I think you have to be together. You have to talk to your community, your peers, and they will help you. I think it's very important, because it's also political, you know? You have to build that. And I think that there is room for everybody, you know, but we need to talk about equity too. This is something, because when we're talking to the Global South, you know, the amount we pay, sometimes it's very difficult for us, but I have to say that everybody, every publisher, we have been working together, and equity is being like, you know, a very smooth part of the negotiation. I think that we are very successful, and it's been a win-win with the publishers, I think. So I'm really happy that we're including small publishers too, you know.
Do we have time for one more question or no? No. Okay. Sharon, sorry, we can take it offline. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your perspectives, and thank you to the audience. Yeah.